Applause is perfectly appropriate at this time. Thank you, Harvey. Whoever was so good as to adjust the mood lighting, Ken. The mood lighting is wonderful, but good, but I couldn't see my notes. Thank you. So, have you ever experienced what I call divine discontent? No. You have. You got something to go to yet. Divine discontent is that little nudging, urging inside you that says something's got to change around here. Anybody ever had that one? Yeah, it just says, I want more than this. I want growth. I want evolution. I want to rise up to my higher awareness. I want more. And that's the infinite in us, urging us on and up. And once you make that decision, it just starts to happen automatically. I don't know if you've ever wrestled with a little bit of a health challenge, where for weeks and even months, there's a little niggling thing in your body that you keep saying, no. And finally, you make an appointment, you go to the doctor, and the minute you make that appointment, it clears up. Have you ever been there? You get to the doctor, and you say, I forget what it was I made the appointment for. There's a woman called Michelle Werner Davis in a book called Fire Your Shrink. Says the same thing happens in therapy. That is the decision, the intention to enter into therapy, the decisions that when you say, okay, that's it, I'm going to do something about this, it starts to clear itself up. Now, and sure, you can still investigate your childhood and you can wrestle with the shadow and all the stuff you do, but the real healing comes from that intention to be healed. And that's so true in all of our lives, right? So as we move into this season, I think that Jesus, the man Jesus, at some time must have had that divine discontent and said, all the time he was missing the unaccounted for years, at some time he must have said, okay, I want more. And he made a decision to be more, to be who he was, to be aware of the divine consciousness within himself. And he started doing miracles. And it got better, and it evolved. You know what I'm saying? So, this time of year we hear all the sounds and joys and celebrations of the Christmas season. And I think of the Metaphysical Bible Dictionary that's published by Unity magazine, or not magazine, Unity School of Christianity. And they have a dictionary that takes all the names of the places and the people in the Bible and gives an interpretation of them. So that we can do take the Christmas story, the Easter story, all sorts of stories and interpret them a little differently, a little metaphorically. And the Metaphysical Bible Dictionary says that angels are thoughts. So an angel appeared unto someone. It's a thought that occurred. So, hark the herald angels sing. When we hear that all around us this time of year, that's new thoughts coming into our minds. I like to think of the birds as the herald angels. I like to think of the crashing of the waves as the herald angels, bringing us new thoughts. So, and speaking of birds, sometime this spring, make sure you get yourself out of the city into the wilds where it's really quiet and just sit and listen to all the different bird sounds. It's amazing, isn't it? You might be able even to do it in your backyard. But that's the voice of God singing to you right there. That's what that is. So, when we make a decision to turn to God, and if you don't like being churchy, because we know that God is love. So if you don't like the churchy sound of it, say when we make the decision to turn to love, that automatically, like when we make the appointment to go to the doctor, suddenly we're healed. When we make our decision to turn to love, suddenly we have spiritual healing. And even if you don't call it God, if you call it love, what you're experiencing is the divine within yourself. So the waves crashing on the rocky shore, reminding you, singing to yourself, singing to who you are. The sound of laughter. Hark the herald angels sing. That's God speaking. And of course, the sounds of Christmas. I want to read to you a poem that I found on the internet. I love the internet. I don't know who wrote this. It's anonymous. But it's called, I Am the Christmas Spirit. I enter the home of poverty, causing pale-faced children to open their eyes in pleased wonder. I cause the miser's clutched hand to relax, and then paint a bright spot on his soul. I cause the aged to renew their youth and to laugh in the glad old way. I keep romance alive in the heart of childhood and brighten sleep with dreams woven with magic. I cause eager feet to climb dark stairways filled with baskets, leaving behind hearts amazed at the goodness of the world. I cause the prodigal to pause a moment on his wild, wasteful way and send to anxious love some little token that releases glad tears, tears which wash away the hard lines of sorrow. I enter dark prison cells, reminding scarred manhood of what might have been, and pointing forward to good days yet to come. I come softly into the still white home of pain, and lips that are too weak to speak just tremble in silent, eloquent gratitude. In 1,000 ways, I cause the weary world to look up into the face of God, and for a little moment, forget the things that are small and wretched. I am the Christmas spirit. You know, I really go through Christmas time the left brain, right brain conundrum thing. You know, the whole Christmas story is taught in traditional Christianity about Immaculate Conception and virgin birth and all that stuff, which to our scientific, logical, intellectual minds doesn't make any sense. When viewed metaphorically as a symbol of something else, does make sense. You know, how do you reconcile that stuff? And no matter how much I do my bah humbug thing at the beginning of December and say, I'm ignoring Christmas this year, I'm not going there, it's just nothing but a consumer, frenzy, da-da-da-da-da. Somehow, as the month goes along, and maybe you hear a Christmas, no, I'm not hearing Christmas carols in the mall, that sets me way back, but maybe a nice Christmas concert, or you see your friends manning the kettles for the Salvation Army down in front of the liquor store, and you see things happening, and I start to get moved along, and I get a little more and more into it. Anybody else have that experience? Something is kind of irresistible pulling you along. You can't help but do something of it. So I become a little bit as the child again. Yes, the childness, the innocence and the childness and the openness and the intuitive openness of the children. That's what allows me to let it all in. When I stop trying to figure it out and make sense of it and critique it and tell the world what's wrong with it and stuff. Ernest Holmes says that the Immaculate Conception, the virgin birth, and all those things which we think are Christian theology are all as old as time. And that's true, those themes have recurred back at least to Egyptian times. And they stand for the concept of originating power, creative principle or power, God and the Word of God operating in and through all things. This was called the Spirit of God operating upon the soul of God, or the father-mother principle. The old philosophers had the idea of something that moves, that is the Father God, something that is moved upon, that is the Mother God, and the result is the child. A metaphor for the creative thought. And in New Thought, we think that all of it is God. That's our Trinity, if you will. Our Trinity, if you want to have that. There is that which moves, that which is moved upon, and that which is created as a result of that movement. And it's all one. It's as though we could get a lump of Play-Doh and insert a computer program into it so that it just automatically shapes itself into, oh, there's a flower, and there's a dragon, and and just keeps doing that. And the Play-Doh, the program that it was in, You know what I'm saying? Within the playground. And the dragons and the flowers, that's all God. That's what it is. And that's what our lives are. And the part that we can handle is the programming part. And we do that with our thinking. Yeah, intentions. Yeah. Our angels, right? Our angels, we do that. So we do that. The material, the intelligence, and the result are all God. You've probably all heard of Meister Eckhart, possibly the greatest mystic of the Middle Ages, said that God had never had but one song, and that the eternal is forever begetting the only begotten. Always. God is that plasticine, that Play-Doh, just eternally begetting itself into the ever begotten. So Christmas is sometimes better celebrated without the need to try and understand it. You know, if we can just move into that intuitive, sensitive feeling part of it. So, as this is my last talk before I go on holidays, I'd like to just say a couple of things about what happens at Christmas around the world. A couple of weeks ago, several of us attended a wonderful evening presented by the Sikh community. It was great. We had fabulous food and came to an understanding of what they're about and the consistencies in our teachings and the differences in our teachings. And I know in Victoria one time we held a series of evenings like that where we invited a speaker from another faith community to come and speak and then answer questions. And it was very well. And people always seem to really enjoy that. So I thought, well, let's talk a little bit about how people do Christmas a little differently around the world. Some of it you may know, some of it may come as a surprise. So, even in non-Christian countries, Christmas is celebrated, right? Lots of non-Christians celebrate Christmas. And at the same time, there's Hanukkah and Kwanzaa and the winter solstice and all sorts of different interpretations of the darkness becoming the light. That's what happens at Christmas time. In Sweden, Christmas lasts for 1 month, beginning on December 13th. And the festival of St. Lucia is big in Sweden. Now, nobody's quite sure how St. Lucia happened to be a saint in Sweden because she came from Sicily. How she got there or not. But back in the early days of Christian persecution, the Swedes hid in caves, and St. Lucia smuggled food to them. And so now at the festival of St. Lucia, the oldest daughter in the family dresses in a white dress with a red sash, puts an evergreen wreath on her head with 7 candles to light her way. And symbolically, she takes coffee and buns to every member of the family in their rooms, like in their caves. And of course, the Festival of the Lights, or parades where, you know, all the young maidens have wreaths with 7 candles on their heads. That's what that's commemorating. And of course, we put up Christmas trees in our offices. They'll have little mini festivals of the lights and mini parades all around Sweden. So that's a real cool celebration. And what we're actually celebrating there is the willingness of humanity to sacrifice ourselves for others. So that's also part of the Christmas celebration, the Christmas spirit. In Russia, St. Nicholas is especially popular. Now, the legend is that the 11th century Prince Vladimir traveled to Constantinople to become baptized. And he came back with all sorts of stories of the miracles of St. Nicholas of Myra. And now, if you look around, Russian Orthodox churches are usually called the Church of St. Nicholas, right? Many Eastern Orthodox churches have been named for that saint, and the Feast of St. Nicholas is once again celebrated in Russia. It's celebrated on January 6th, and during the communist rule, it was repressed, right? Because there were no Christians in Russia at that time. But, and I relate to this because when I was growing up, my grandparents were Jehovah's Witnesses, so they didn't do Christmas. But we had one heck of a New Year's dinner, you know, and we knew what we were doing. We were having Christmas at Grandma's when it was New Year's. So in Russia, that's what the people did. They carried on. They didn't call it St. Nicholas. They called it Grandfather Frost for a few generations, right? But they knew what they were doing when they decorated their New Year's trees. In Russia also, the Mass celebrated on Christmas Eve is followed by a feast of 12 meatless dishes. And I was married to a Ukrainian chef for a few years, so I know this dinner. But the most important of it is a kind of sweet porridge called kucha. And it's made with poppy seeds and can't remember what else. Honey, right. Ukrainians all over the place here. And that's when what I understand is that the kucha is thrown on the wall or on the ceiling, a spoonful of it, to see if it sticks. And that's the forecast of what the harvest is going to be like next year by the quality of the wheat. Great fun, lots of fun to do that. In Russia, the gifts come from babushka, who according to, of course that's another word for brown, no, babushka is the shawl she wears, right? And the legend is that babushka is an old woman who failed to give shelter to the three wise men, the Magi, when they were traveling. And so now her punishment is she travels throughout the countryside visiting homes of the children, looking for the gifts for the Magi, and doing her penance, if you will. In the Eastern Orthodox Church of Russia, it is customary to fast until after the church service before, and I think fasting is an important part of many church services in many ways before that dinner. In Poland, they do the same 12 meatless course dinner, but in Poland, they set out an extra chair in case the Holy Spirit or a stranger comes by. That's Christmas spirit, isn't it? In Venezuela, Christians attend an early morning mass every day for the week preceding Christmas. And here's, I promised some jokes. Not really a joke, but it's kid stuff. In Venezuela, the children tie a string to their big toe and hang the string outside the window. Because in Venezuela, it's customary to roller skate to mass, to church in the morning. And if you're still in bed and your string's hanging out the window, everybody who passes by yanks on your string to get you out of bed and get you to church. After church, tostadas and coffee, of course. And then again, isn't that everywhere? Christmas spirit is food and drink, isn't it? So, in Spain, children receive their gifts from Balthazar, who was one of the Magi. And it's the belief that the Magi traveled throughout the countryside, reenacting that journey to Bethlehem. And children leave their shoes out on their windowsill, filled with grains and oats and carrots and apples, for the horses of the Magi. So it's not just, gimme, 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 I'm hanging out my stocking, I'm going to get stuff. It's an exchange. So we have carrots and apples for the horses, and in return we find a little something in our shoes. And on December 28th, Spaniards celebrate the Feast of the Holy Innocents. Young boys of the town light bonfires, and one of them gets to act as the mayor and order all the adults about. And he makes the adults do civic duty like sweeping the streets. And so again, Christmas now, another aspect of Christmas is the aspect of service, isn't it? And what a way to get children involved when the children can tell the parents what to do instead. And in Scandinavia is the tradition of the Yule log. And I love this one. It was originally thought that it's this time of year, the very darkest and coldest time of year, and the spirits of the dead were thought to roam the countryside. And it was scary. It wasn't safe to sleep alone. So the whole extended family, the master, the servants, everybody, slept on the hearth on a bed of new straw. Slept together. And a big tree, a Yule log, was originally a whole tree that they started feeding into the fireplace, butt end first, and then they gradually fed it in and timed it just so that it got used up over the Yule season. That's what the Yule log's really about. In Mexico, the main Christmas celebration is Los Calzados. That's the procession reenacting the journey of Joseph and Mary and their search for some place to stay. And it lasts for 9 days, and the groups, or I guess communities or groups of friends and families, they're divided into two groups, the pilgrims and the innkeepers. And what they do every night for 9 nights is they go out and call on somebody, the pilgrims do, and the innkeepers turn them away. until the last night, the night the home that has been designated as where this nativity scene is set up. The pilgrims all go there, and they're welcomed and joyously brought in, and a prayer is said, and food and drink again. I forgot one in Russia. In Russia, the Orthodox, of course, which is Catholic, the priest comes to every home with a bevy of little altar boys, I guess, and they have holy water. And the priest goes into every room in every house and blesses it, and the holy water gets sprinkled about. I guess we're not going to do that here this year. So, in Mexico, we party. But everywhere, there are wonderful, wonderful traditions that create a sense of community. Does it really matter how we celebrate? The thing is, what is it that we're celebrating? Christian values is what we're celebrating, though it would be the epitome of what's the word I'm looking for? Arrogance to assume that only Christians have Christian values. But everywhere we are celebrating those ideals, those values that we would call Christian values. And they're the values that people everywhere have said. And normally when I think of Christmas, I think first of all, food and family. Yes? But these are the values when people really think about it in order that Christmas represents to them. Number one value is service. Number two is sharing. Number three is family and home. And number four is food and fun. So isn't that interesting? So even if we don't have family or we don't want to be with our family, the first two rewards from Christmas are still available to us. The service and the sharing. And of course we can all choose our families, can't we? Let's say good luck. We can all choose our families. And so we become aware. I just want once more to remind you that the Christmas story of the birth of Jesus, like all the traditions around the world, is just the one vehicle for celebrating the miracle of knowing who we are. That we too are the Son of God. That we too are made of God's stuff. Jesus himself said, "You too shall do these and more. Ye are God's." And that's the miracle, reminding ourselves of who we are. And so we're not celebrating a birth 2,000 years ago. We're celebrating a birth and a rebirth in our own consciousness today. Ernest Holmes said, "Christmas is the most glorious tradition on the face of the earth, the greatest idea of profound simplicity ever uttered by the mind of man, the sweetest story ever told. But we must bring it to earth. What good is it to merely sing praises to a heavenly host? What good to look back 2,000 years ago to watch a divine event of the incarnation of life and light and love, of wisdom, truth, beauty and majesty, power and might? What good unless right now Christ is born in us today?" And again, Christ is a title that means one who is aware of the spark of the divine within. So when we wake up to that spark, we're born again and again. We have the ability to create miracles, to share, to serve, to love. And then the Christ is born where we are and reborn in us every day and every minute. Not just at Christmas time, but at Christmas time, we recognize it in each other, and we celebrate it, and we give thanks for it, and we become the herald angels, announcing, God is, I am, and so it is.